Agri-voltaics has done what traditional solar farms failed to do for decades. This emerging technology has combined two of the largest industries, agriculture and solar energy, into one seamlessly. Now, farmers can generate electricity using a canopy of solar panels while simultaneously growing herbs, vegetables, and fruits right underneath. The implications are staggering. The US alone has to keep buying land for solar farms to keep up with the growing energy demands from data centers. Farmers don't have to compete with multi-billion-dollar corporations for buying new land. Meanwhile, AI and robotics are flipping the farming industry on its head. But before we get into all that, let's first discuss the big problem with solar farms. Traditional solar farms have been a defining revolution in the energy sector over the last few decades. But as it turns out, they have a major flaw. They require a lot of land, about 5 acres per megawatt to be exact. In the past, this wasn't much of a problem, as the solar farms were generally smaller in scale. But today, countries around the globe are pushing for green energy. Solar farms built today have gigawatts worth of capacity, taking up thousands of hectares of land. But why is that bad? Well, when so much land is being used by one industry, it is bound to put another major industry out of commission. In this case, that victim has been agriculture. Much like solar farms, agriculture also requires a large amount of land. And because of the ever-expanding need for energy, this valuable commodity has been hard to get, especially for the average farmer who has way less capital to spend than a major solar energy corporation. The results have been less than desirable, to say the least. Agriculture and the solar industry now have to compete directly with each other for the available land, driving up the prices. Now, it is impossible to take sides on this matter. We all need more green energy, and we also need agriculture as our primary food source. So, how do you solve the issue? The answer is a compromise that ensures the benefit of both these very important industries. And the name of that compromise is Agri Voltaics, a technological innovation that seeks to change the game entirely. Developing a solution. Agri Voltaics is a relatively recent invention, simply because the issue it solves only appeared a few decades ago. Adolf Gertzberger and Armin Zastrow, two physicists from Germany, foresaw the problem before anyone else in 1982. And they were the first to come up with the idea of the dual use of land, both for agriculture and for solar farms. Their idea was simple yet radical. Raise the solar panels about 6.5 feet above ground, and space out the rows of panels wide enough that farm machinery can easily pass through. Now, you could generate electricity while growing crops underneath. Problem solved. Only, the problem they were solving wasn't yet a thing. Land was abundant, and solar panels were far too expensive for widespread use. This is mainly why the idea was mostly ignored. However, in 2004, it caught the attention of Akira Nagashima, a Japanese engineer. Japan is an island with relatively little arable land, so the agrivoltaic idea was much more needed in the region. Akira Nagashima took the theory and turned it into reality. He built the first solar sharing system with panels mounted on a pagoda-like structure and crops growing underneath. The results were astounding. While the yields were lower, there was a decent output of both crops and energy from the test system. In fact, the results were so promising that the Japanese government created a support scheme to further analyze and incorporate the technology. Soon enough, agrivoltaics became a widely discussed solution. In modern days, there are 3 main methods of agrivoltaics. The first is the elevated rack system, similar to the original concept. Solar panels are installed in farmlands high enough that people, farm equipment, and the crop underneath have enough space. The other factor is the spacing. The panels are installed in a checkerboard pattern, or in rows with wide spacing between them. This is done to ensure sunlight can reach the area underneath for the plants. This method is usually reserved for taller crops. The second method is the non-elevated system. It involves installing solar panels at ground height. The crops are planted in the space in between the rows of panels. Now, because taller crops would block out sunlight for the panels, this method is reserved mainly for short crops like lettuce and herbs. Finally, there is the greenhouse method. Panels are installed as roofs for greenhouses to allow careful management of the internal climate while also generating electricity. Japan and Europe utilize the greenhouse system extensively. But the question is, are all these agrivoltaic practices actually any good? Well, the simple answer is yes. Agri-voltaics have some unique benefits that neither normal farming nor solar installation has. Improving crop yields. It is a little-known fact that most of the crops grown in the farmlands are actually getting more sunlight than it needs. Crops have what is known as a light saturation point. It varies between each plant, but the basic concept remains the same. The light saturation point is the sunlight exposure level at which the plant's photosynthesis is operating at its maximum capacity. Most plants in farmlands have constant exposure to sunlight, usually exceeding their light saturation point by 2 or even 3 times. This causes some severe drawbacks. The plant goes into stress mode, shutting down its photosynthetic system temporarily to prevent damage from the excess sunlight. As a result, the productivity is reduced and the yield is much lower. The agrivoltaic system is primarily designed to solve this issue. The solar panels act as shade to reduce the sunlight reaching the crops underneath. For the low light saturation point crops such as lettuce, spinach, berries, and many herbs, this actually improves yield significantly. A microclimate environment is created under the panels, which is far more hospitable for the crop than the farmlands and overexposure to sunlight. And then there is the water issue. When plants are stressed because of higher than needed sunlight, they rapidly lose water through their leaves to cool down. This significantly increases the water requirements of a field. Now here is a number most people don't know about. Nearly 70% of the fresh water in the world is used for agriculture. And as we head into a world of water scarcity due to environmental changes, this overuse of water is not sustainable long term. Plus, the more water is used, the higher crop costs get. By blocking out sunlight, solar panels reduce the water wasted by the plants. At the same time, it helps keep the water within the soil itself from evaporating. According to several studies, agrivoltaics help improve water efficiency in crops by a staggering 20 to 47%. At the same time, it helps reduce the temperature of the soil underneath by a few degrees. Right now, this water conservation is quite useful, economically and environmentally. But in the future, it may be extremely essential in maintaining the global food supply if the freshwater supply drops, as is expected due to climate change. Speaking of climate, agrivoltaics also help in that aspect in a different way. Aside from blocking sunlight, the solar panels in an agrivoltaic system also act as a physical barrier. One of the main ways crops get destroyed is from natural disasters and extreme temperatures. Storms and hail can level entire fields in hours, but the panels act as physical shields, preventing that damage. Plus, late spring frost also destroys crop fields. But the panels help trap the heat from the ground during the night, keeping the plants a little bit warmer. The big question is, do all these factors actually contribute to plant health and yield? According to research, they do. It varies from crop to crop, but for shade-tolerant and water-stressed crops, the results have been extremely positive. Take the chiltepin peppers experiment, for example, done in the University of Arizona's Biosphere 2. The total yield from plants under the solar panels, compared to the ones out in the open, was 3 times greater. Another study calculated a 20% increase in potato yields under solar panel shading, and these results are magnified across various crops in harsh climate events like droughts and heat waves. The agrivoltaic system is not one size fits all. Its performance varies between different types of plants, but where it works extremely well. And even in plants that are generally not shade tolerant, there are promising developments. Experts have been able to reduce yield loss among such plants to a mere 3% decline, a compromise easily justified by the electricity produced from the solar panels. Improving energy production. The agrivoltaic system isn't a one-sided thing. It is a symbiosis. While the plants benefit, they also help the solar panels along. And the main way this happens is through heat management. It isn't just plants that reduce yield when they overheat. Solar panels do the same. When the solar cells get too hot, they stop producing as much electricity, resulting in reduced output. Agri Voltaics helps manage this. Plants have a phenomenon called transpiration. Much like respiration, plants transpire and lose water vapor through their leaves. Normally, these vapors get dispersed in a field. But in an agrivoltaic system, they get trapped under the panels, helping cool its own. As a result, the solar panels are able to produce more electricity. Agrivoltaic systems generally produce more electricity per panel compared to a standard solar farm because the plants create the perfect microclimate to keep them running at optimal temperatures. This way, both the crops and the solar panel infrastructure benefit. While these benefits of agrivoltaics are universal, there is a unique way this technology is being employed by China. Combating desertification. China utilizes agrivoltaics in the Kabuxi Desert to essentially stop the desert from expanding. Desertification occurs when fertile land degrades and turns into a desert due to climate change. Most of the time, such a phenomenon can only be combated through terrain manipulation and barriers that generally aren't productive on their own. The agrivoltaic system changed that concept completely. When solar panels were installed on the degraded land in the Kabuxi Desert, it caused a very effective restorative effect. The farmers planted tomatoes and desert herbs underneath the panels, and the change was apparent in just a few months. The solar panels provided shade, reduced evaporation, and blocked strong winds. The microclimate created underneath was much more hospitable to vegetation. Additionally, the water used to clean the panels would seep into the ground, acting as a positive byproduct that irrigated the plants. Soon enough, the plants began to grow. But this worked a bit too well. The microclimates became so hospitable for vegetation that grass growth grew out of control. Soon enough, the grass had grown so tall that it blocked sunlight from the solar panels. Being resourceful, China is not letting this opportunity go to waste. They decided to bring in the ultimate four-legged grass experts to help mitigate the situation. Sheep in the field. Agrivoltaics isn't just limited to crops. It also includes livestock. One of the earliest ways agrivoltaics became mainstream in recent years was as a way to control grass growth in solar farms. Farmers would bring in their sheep and goats, and they would graze the field clean, being far more meticulous than a human worker. When China faced the same issue, it opted for the same solution. Sheep and other livestock were brought in to graze away the excess grass, making the solar farms fully operational once again. At the same time, the manure from the livestock acted as natural fertilizer for the crops, the perfect symbiotic loop between crops, livestock, and solar panels. But while China has been more open to this idea, most of the solar farms around the world refuse to have sheep graze near the solar panels. They believe the risk is far too high for the equipment to accidentally get damaged. This is especially true for the more traditional solar farms, where the panels are installed much closer to the ground. But the benefits are definitely there. Both the solar farms and the farmers save money. Grazing is cheaper than lawnmowers, and the sheep get fed free of cost. Sometimes the farmers are even paid for the job. The foliage quality also improves significantly. Meanwhile, sheep that grazed in open fields of solar farms have been observed to produce more wool of higher quality than in captivity. The biggest agrivoltaic experiment. Already, we are seeing agrivoltaics taking root in agricultural practices around the globe, and the one leading the pack is Germany. In 2016, Germany installed the largest agrivoltaic research facility in the world, and within it, they tested the concept at the root of agrivoltaics like never before. First, they created a layout that is ideal for machinery to operate in, with a height clearance of 16 feet. Tractors, harvesters, planters, everything could operate within. This way, the actual farming processes would not be impacted, and normal farming practices and equipment could be employed. For the test, scientists planted 4 winter crops: clover, potatoes, wheat, and celery. They were regularly maintained, watered, and cared for, just like they would be on a farm. Over the next 2 years, scientists studied both the technical and agricultural aspects of the experiments. They then compared their findings with the metrics of an agricultural farm and a solar farm built separately nearby for the experiment. In the first year, the results were quite promising. The overall land use efficiency of the agrivoltaic setup was 160% higher. This means that the agrivoltaic farm produced 160% more output in total in terms of electricity generated and crop yield combined. But the real surprise came in 2018. The year was particularly hot and dry, which is not ideal for crops. But while the plants in the normal farms suffered, the agrivoltaic farm's plants thrived. The solar panels shielded them from the brunt of heat and moisture loss. And the results were staggering. Compared to the reference field, 3 of the 4 crops in the experiment yielded higher output. The celery crop was 12% more bountiful, while the wheat yield was 3% higher. Only clover's output went down by 8%. Through this experiment, experts have been able to define the best practices for an effective agrivoltaic system to maximize land efficiency as much as possible. The results also prove that agrivoltaics are an effective solution for farmland located in dry and hot regions. Most importantly, the findings from this project were also utilized by India in Maharashtra, where it helped grow the yield from tomatoes and cotton by nearly 40%. The problem with agrivoltaics. Unfortunately, agrivoltaic isn't a system without its flaws. The biggest barrier for an average farmer to incorporate this system is the cost. Since the solar panels are mounted higher up, they need more extensive infrastructure to support them than a standard solar farm. And by intertwining the fields with solar infrastructure, they limit the kind of machinery they can use. This kind of farming is unique, and more often than not, the farmer has to source specialized farm equipment and machinery to work within it. They also need to specialize in managing the microclimates beneath the panels, ensuring that the crop yield is not reduced due to management. All of this adds cost in the short and long term. This has been a major hurdle to the widespread adoption of the agrivoltaic system. And since this emerging tech is still developing, there aren't a lot of government incentives to make farmers incorporate it either. As a matter of fact, there is a severe lack of regulations and policies regarding agrivoltaic. Many states in the U.S. don't even know which classification these systems fall into under land zoning laws. For a farmer, this is a huge red flag. Incorporating the tech too early could mean that some future regulation could put the owner out of business. Uncertainty about permits, tax categories, and laws are landmines that need to be navigated before the idea of agrivoltaics can be made more mainstream. And it's not like this system is ideal for the farmland itself. While it does have a lot of benefits, as we discussed, it also poses some huge drawbacks. The main big one is that every crop doesn't work in such a system. Many of the high-profit crops are light demanding. They need more sunlight to grow. Take corn, for example. It is one of the most widely farmed crops in the U.S., but its yield would be reduced significantly under the shade of solar panels. Farmers don't want to limit their options when it comes to what crop they plant each year. And even with shade-preferring plants, you have to get the shade levels just right for that specific plant. Otherwise, the yield would be negatively affected. And, well, a massive solar farm infrastructure cannot be moved around to adjust shade each time a new crop is to be planted. That is, unless you invest in the more expensive dynamic structures that can quickly reorient the panels as needed. Finally, we have the soil health concerns. When a solar farm's infrastructure is installed, it involves a lot of compacting of the soil. This makes the soil uninhabitable for most plants. This is why the agrivoltaic system requires prior planning and the use of special techniques to avoid soil compaction entirely. Now, while these concerns are very serious, that doesn't mean they cannot be fixed. With so many big changes, all the problems can be mitigated or eliminated. In time, the regulations needed for agrivoltaic will be developed, and then farmers will be more than happy to incorporate this system in their fields. With the rising demand for data centers, it is likely that this will happen soon, since agrivoltaics will be a valuable energy source to meet the growing demand. Aside from policy changes, the government can also grant incentives for farmers to utilize the emerging tech. This can help make up for the reduced crop output. Finally, the government can subsidize the dynamic solar panel arrays since they are critical to agrivoltaics. Forefront of technology. The widespread incorporation of agrivoltaics is further helped along by the technological advancements being made. One of the most important such developments is the wavelength selective panel. You see, sunlight is made up of various types of light wavelengths, and plants don't actually use all these wavelengths for photosynthesis. The idea behind wavelength selective panels is simple yet brilliant. These panels are designed to only capture and generate electricity using wavelengths that plants don't need. Meanwhile, the wavelengths that plants do need pass through, like passing through glass, reaching the plants underneath. This effectively eliminates all the big problems that plague modern agrivoltaic systems. Farms can generate electricity across the field without compromising the crop yield or quality. If this technology works, it could unlock potential for all kinds of crops to be planted in agrivoltaic systems, including commodity grains that require more sunlight. Unfortunately, the technology is still in the development phase, but there is a lot more to look forward to. Entities like the Fraunhofer Institute are dedicated to further improving the agrivoltaics model through the use of AI and robotics. Managing the microclimates and crop health in an agrivoltaic system is very tough. It is far more complex than normal farming, at least for a human. For an AI, not so much. An AI-driven system can easily optimize the panel angles across a field to meet the crop's light requirements at any given time. Not only that, but it can make adjustments according to weather and electricity prices to optimize profits. Meanwhile, robotics can be used to manage the crops. They can do panel maintenance, monitor the plants, and do precision irrigation where needed to conserve water. All these are technological developments being studied in the Fraunhofer Institute. Meanwhile, another innovation is emerging, nicknamed the Agri Voltaics. These are the marine versions of agrivoltaics. Essentially, scientists attach solar panels to flotation devices so they can be deployed over water. These types of panels are especially useful for fish and shrimp farming, helping provide shade for the fish underneath, while also generating electricity. But the utilization extends far beyond that. Aquavoltaics can also be deployed in irrigation reservoirs used by farmers for their crops. But in this case, their main function is to cover the surface and prevent the evaporation of water due to heat. Needless to say, there is a bright future for the agrivoltaic industry, with these impressive inventions on the horizon. That does it for this video. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe to the channels. See you in the next one.